The clock on the wall showed 7:30 p.m. when Lisa finished cleaning the last patient chair. It had been one of those long Tuesday evenings at the dental clinic, where everything seemed to take twice as long as usual. 3 emergency patients had walked in, 2 appointments ran late, and the new dental assistant had called in sick. Lisa had been working as a dental hygienist for almost 9 years now. She knew every corner of this small clinic like the back of her hand. Dr. Peterson trusted her completely to handle the closing routine, which usually took about 45 minutes. If everything went smoothly, tonight, though, she was exhausted. Her mind kept wandering to her 8-year-old son Tommy, who was practicing for his school's talent show. He had been working on a magic trick for weeks, and tonight was supposed to be their practice session together. She had promised to help him with his card tricks after dinner, but now it was already past his bedtime. The clinic felt different. When it was empty, during the day, it buzzed with activity, patients coming and going, the phone ringing constantly, and the sound of dental equipment humming in the background. But now, with just the soft fluorescent lights overhead and the quiet hum of the sterilizer, it felt almost peaceful. Lisa moved through her closing checklist methodically. She had done this routine hundreds of times before. First, she wiped down all the surfaces with disinfectant, making sure every chair and counter was spotless. Then she organized the instruments that needed to be sterilized overnight. The smell of the cleaning solution was so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor asking if she could pick up some milk on the way home. She quickly typed back that she would, then slipped the phone into her pocket. The grocery store closed at 9 p.m., so she still had time if she finished up soon. The most tedious part of closing was always cleaning the ultrasonic scaler tips. These were small, delicate instruments that looked like tiny metal needles attached to thin cables. They vibrated at high speeds to remove plaque and tartar from teeth during cleanings. Each tip had to be carefully cleaned and sterilized after every use. Lisa had developed her own system over the years. She would lay out all the scaler tips on a metal tray, then clean each one individually with a special brush and solution. It was detailed work that required attention, but after doing it for so long, she could almost do it with her eyes closed. Tonight, however, her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Tommy's disappointed face when she had called to say she would be late again. This was the 3rd time this month that work had kept her from their evening plans. She made a mental note to talk to Dr. Peterson about adjusting her schedule. As she worked, Lisa found herself moving a bit faster than usual. The sooner she finished, the sooner she could get home and at least say goodnight to Tommy. Maybe she could still help him practice his magic trick for a few minutes. Before bed, the radio in the background was playing soft jazz, something Dr. Peterson always left on because he said it helped patients relax. Lisa hummed along quietly as she worked, her hands moving in the familiar rhythm of cleaning and organizing. She had just finished cleaning the last scaler tip when she realized she needed to refill. The cleaning solution container, the bottle, was on the top shelf of the supply cabinet, just out of easy reach. Lisa stood on her tiptoes and stretched up to grab it, but her uniform sleeve caught on the edge of the metal instrument tray. In that split second, everything changed. The tray tilted, and the scaler tip she had just cleaned went flying through the air. It happened so fast that Lisa barely had time to react. The small metal instrument, still attached to its cable, made a perfect arc through the air. Lisa's first instinct was to call out, maybe to warn someone even though she was alone in the clinic. Her mouth opened automatically, and in that exact moment, the scaler tip found its target. The small metal instrument lodged itself firmly in her throat. The realization hit her like a wave. She couldn't believe what had just happened. This was the kind of freak accident that people talked about but never actually experienced. How could something so routine, something she had done thousands of times before, go so terribly wrong? Lisa's hands immediately flew to her throat. She could feel the cable hanging from her mouth, but the scaler tip itself was stuck somewhere deeper. When she tried to swallow, nothing happened. When she tried to cough, she could barely make a sound. The metal instrument was positioned in such a way that it seemed to be affecting her ability to speak normally. Panic began to set in as she realized the gravity of her situation. She was alone in the clinic. It was getting dark outside, and she had a dental instrument stuck in her throat. This was not something covered in any training manual she had ever read. The first thing Lisa felt was pure disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. Not after 9 years of working with these instruments every single day. She stood frozen in the middle of the clinic, one hand pressed against her throat, trying to process what had just occurred. The scalar tip felt strange and foreign in her throat. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was definitely there. She could feel the thin metal cable hanging from her mouth, and every time she tried to swallow, the instrument seemed to resist. It was like trying to swallow something that was fighting back. Lisa's first instinct was to stay calm. She had medical training, after all. She knew that panicking would only make things worse. She took a deep breath through her nose and tried to think logically about the situation. Maybe if she just relaxed her throat muscles, the instrument would slide down naturally. She tilted her head back slightly and tried to swallow again. Nothing. The scalar tip remained firmly lodged in place. In fact, it seemed to have settled, even more securely than before. Lisa felt a small wave of fear begin to build in her stomach. Next, she tried coughing. Surely her body's natural reflexes would help dislodge the object. She gave a small, controlled cough, then a bigger one. But instead of helping, the coughing seemed to push the instrument deeper. The metal tip shifted position, and suddenly Lisa realized she could barely make any sound at all. She tried to call out, to say something, anything. But when she opened her mouth, only a whisper came out. The scalar tip was positioned in such a way that it was interfering with her vocal cords. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She couldn't speak properly, and she was completely alone. Lisa looked around the empty clinic with new eyes. The familiar space that had felt so peaceful just minutes before now felt enormous and isolating. The soft jazz music was still playing on the radio, but it seemed mocking now, too cheerful for what was happening. She walked quickly to the reception desk where her purse was sitting. Her phone was in her pocket, but her hands were shaking so badly that she almost dropped it twice before managing to unlock it. She tried to call 911, but when the dispatcher answered, Lisa realized she couldn't speak clearly enough to explain what was happening. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Lisa tried to respond, but all that came out was a scratchy whisper. Help, stuck. She managed to say, but she knew it wasn't clear enough. Ma'am, I can barely hear you. Can you speak up, please? Lisa tried again, but it was no use. The dispatcher couldn't understand her, and Lisa couldn't explain the situation. After a few more attempts, the call ended, leaving Lisa feeling more desperate than before. She stared at her phone, trying to think of another solution. Texting. She could text someone, but who? Dr. Peterson lived 30 minutes away, and it was already past 8 p.m. Her sister lived across town and didn't have a car. Her neighbor Helen was the closest person, living just 2 blocks away. With trembling fingers, Lisa typed out a message, emergency at clinic. Can't talk, something stuck in throat. Please come now. She sent the message and then immediately sent another one. I'm scared. Please hurry. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Lisa kept trying different things to dislodge the instrument. She tried drinking water from the small cup by the sink, but the liquid just pooled around the object and didn't help. She tried different head positions, tilting forward, backward, to the side. Nothing worked. Every movement seemed to make the scalar tip settle more firmly in place. Lisa began to realize that this wasn't something that was going to resolve itself. The instrument was truly stuck, and she needed professional help to remove it. She tried calling her own voicemail just to hear how she sounded. The recording was barely audible, just a whisper with a strange metallic quality. It was terrifying to hear her own voice reduced to almost nothing. Lisa sat down in one of the patient chairs, trying to control her breathing. She knew that panic would only make things worse, but it was getting harder to stay calm. What if Helen didn't get the message? What if she thought it was a joke? What if nobody came? She looked at the clock on the wall. Only 8 minutes had passed since she sent the text, but it felt like a lifetime. Her throat was starting to feel sore from all the attempts to dislodge the object, and she was becoming more aware of how the instrument was affecting her breathing. Lisa tried to remember everything she knew about throat anatomy from her medical training. The scalar tip was small, but it was positioned in a critical area. If it shifted the wrong way, it could completely block her airway. The thought made her heart race even faster. She picked up her phone again and typed another message to Helen. "Please hurry. Getting worse. Can't breathe well." As she sent the message, Lisa heard a car door slam outside. She had never been so happy to hear that sound in her entire life. Help was finally on the way. Helen burst through the clinic door like a woman on a mission. She was still wearing her gardening gloves and had dirt on her knees from working in her flower beds when she got Lisa's text messages. At 62 years old, Helen had been a nurse for over 30 years before retiring, and she still had that no-nonsense attitude that comes from dealing with medical emergencies. "Lisa, where are you?" Helen called out as she rushed into the clinic. Lisa appeared from behind the reception desk, pointing frantically at her throat. Her face was pale, and there were tears streaming down her cheeks. The thin cable from the scalar tip was still visible hanging from her mouth, and when she tried to speak, only a harsh whisper came out. "It's stuck inside me," Lisa managed to say, her voice barely audible. Helen's nursing instincts kicked in immediately. She had Lisa sit down and tilt her head back so she could get a better look. Using the small flashlight on her cane, Helen peered into Lisa's mouth. She could see the cable, but the actual scalar tip was lodged deeper in the throat where she couldn't see it clearly. "Okay, honey, I need you to stay calm," Helen said in her most reassuring voice. "Can you tell me exactly what happened, Lisa?" Grab a piece of paper from the reception desk and quickly scribble down what had occurred. Her handwriting was shaky, but Helen could make out the important details. The scalar tip had flown through the air when the tray tipped over, and Lisa had opened her mouth at exactly the wrong moment. Helen immediately pulled out her phone and dialed 911. This time, she could speak clearly and explain the situation. To the dispatcher, "I need an ambulance at Peterson Dental Clinic on Maple Street. We have a dental hygienist with a dental instrument lodged in her throat. She can't speak properly and is having difficulty breathing." The dispatcher asked several questions about Lisa's condition and breathing status. Helen checked Lisa's pulse and breathing rate, using skills she hadn't needed in years, but that came back to her naturally. Lisa's pulse was fast but strong, and while her breathing was labored, she wasn't in immediate danger of suffocation. "The ambulance is on its way," Helen told Lisa. "They said it should be here in about 15 minutes. But as the minutes ticked by, Lisa's condition seemed to be getting worse. The scalar tip was shifting slightly with each breath, and she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Helen could see that Lisa was starting to panic more, which was making her breathing even more difficult. "We need to try something else," Helen said. Thinking quickly, "Do you have Dr. Peterson's home number?" Lisa pointed to the contact list posted next to the phone. Helen dialed the number, hoping the dentist would answer. After 3 rings, she heard Dr. Peterson's voice. "Dr. Peterson, this is Helen Rodriguez. I'm Lisa's neighbor. There's been an accident at your clinic, and I need you to come here immediately." Helen explained the situation as clearly as she could. Dr. Peterson had worked with Lisa for years and knew how careful and skilled she was. The fact that this had happened to her meant it was a truly serious situation. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Dr. Peterson said without hesitation. "Don't let her try to remove it herself. Sometimes these things can shift and cause more problems." Helen relayed this message to Lisa, who nodded weakly. She had stopped trying to dislodge the instrument herself after realizing that her attempts were only making things worse while they waited. Helen tried to keep Lisa distracted by asking about Tommy and his magic show. Lisa wrote short responses on paper, grateful for something else to focus on besides the metal object in her throat. The emergency room dispatcher called back to check on Lisa's condition. Helen reported that her breathing was becoming more strained, and she could hear a slight wheeze when Lisa breathed in. This information was relayed to the ambulance crew, who were now just 5 minutes away. Lisa suddenly grabbed Helen's arm and pointed to her throat with a look of panic. The scalar tip had shifted again, and now she was having more trouble breathing. Helen could see that Lisa's lips were starting to look slightly blue round the edges. "The ambulance is almost here," Helen said, trying to keep her voice calm while feeling her own heart racing. "Just focus on taking slow, steady breaths through your nose." They could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. At the same time, Dr. Peterson's car pulled into the parking lot. Helen had never been so relieved to see 2 sets of help arriving. At once, Dr. Peterson rushed into the clinic carrying a small bag of dental instruments. He took one look at Lisa and immediately understood how serious the situation was. "How long has it been stuck?" he asked Helen. "About 25 minutes now," Helen replied. "It seems to be getting worse." The paramedics arrived just as Dr. Peterson was examining Lisa with a small dental mirror. They quickly assessed her vital signs and confirmed what Helen had observed. Lisa's oxygen levels were dropping, and the object was interfering with her breathing more than it had initially. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," the lead paramedic said. "But first, let me call the emergency room and see if they have an ENT specialist available." Dr. Peterson looked at the paramedic, then at Lisa, who was now looking genuinely frightened. "How long would transport take?" he asked. "At least 20 minutes to get to the hospital. Then whatever time it takes to get her into surgery," the paramedic replied. Dr. Peterson made a decision that would change everything. "I think we need to try to remove it here." Dr. Peterson's decision to attempt the removal himself sent a wave of both relief and fear through everyone in the room. The paramedics exchanged glances. Clearly weighing the risks of this unconventional approach, Helen squeezed Lisa's hand, trying to offer comfort while her own heart pounded with worry. "Are you sure about this, Doc?" asked the lead paramedic, a man named Rodriguez who had been working emergencies for 15 years. "This isn't exactly standard procedure." Dr. Peterson was already washing his hands at the clinic sink, his movements quick but deliberate. "I've been working in mouths and throats for 22 years, he said. "I know this equipment better than anyone, and I know exactly how these scalar tips work. The transport time plus waiting for an ENT specialist could be too long." Lisa looked up at her boss with a mixture of gratitude and terror. She had worked with Dr. Peterson for almost a decade and trusted his skills completely. But this was unlike anything either of them had ever faced before. She tried to nod her agreement, but even that small movement seemed to affect the position of the instrument in her throat. "I'm going to need everyone to help," Dr. Peterson continued, pulling on latex gloves. "Helen, you'll assist me since you have medical training. Rodriguez, I need you and your partner to monitor her vital signs and be ready to take over if anything goes wrong." The clinic's dental chair was adjusted to the perfect position, with the overhead light focused directly on Lisa's mouth. Dr. Peterson gathered his instruments carefully, a small dental mirror, a pair of precise forceps, and a suction device to clear any saliva or debris. "Lisa, I need you to try to relax as much as possible," Dr. Peterson said gently. "I know that's almost impossible right now, but the more you can keep your throat muscles relaxed, the easier this will be." Helen positioned herself next to the chair, ready to hand Dr. Peterson instruments or help in any way needed. The paramedics set up their monitoring equipment, keeping a close eye on Lisa's oxygen levels and heart rate. Dr. Peterson began by using the dental mirror to get a clear view of the situation. The scalar tip was lodged at an awkward angle, wedged against the soft tissue in a way that made it nearly invisible from above. He could see why Lisa hadn't been able to dislodge it herself. The instrument was positioned in such a way that any swallowing or coughing motion would only push it deeper. "I can see it," he said quietly. "It's caught on the side wall of the throat, just above the voice box. That's why it's affecting your speech." The next few minutes were the most tense of everyone's lives. Dr. Peterson worked with the precision of a surgeon, using his years of experience working in small, delicate spaces. He carefully maneuvered the forceps into position, trying to grasp the scalar tip without pushing it further down. Her oxygen levels are dropping, Rodriguez announced. Watching the monitor, we're at 85%. Almost got it, Dr. Peterson replied, his voice steady despite the pressure. Helen, can you use the suction here? I need to see clearly. Helen operated the suction device with the skill of someone who had assisted in medical procedures for decades. The combination of her nursing experience and Dr. Peterson's dental expertise created a team that worked together seamlessly. Lisa remained as still as humanly possible, fighting every natural reflex to gag or move. She could feel the instruments moving around in her throat, and the sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She focused on breathing slowly through her nose, trying to give Dr. Peterson the best possible conditions to work. I've got a grip on it, Dr. Peterson said after what felt like an eternity. But it's really wedged in there. I'm going to need to rotate it slightly to get it loose. The rotation was the most delicate part of the entire procedure. One wrong move could push the scalar tip into Lisa's airway completely, or it could cause damage to the surrounding tissue. Dr. Peterson's hands, steady from years of detailed dental work, moved with the precision of a watchmaker. Oxygen is down to 82%. Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with concern. How much longer? Just a few more seconds. Dr. Peterson replied. He could feel the scalar tip beginning to loosen its grip on the throat tissue. It's starting to come free. Lisa felt the moment when the instrument finally released its hold. It was like a cork being pulled from a bottle. Suddenly there was movement, where there had been none before. Dr. Peterson continued to work carefully, slowly extracting the scalar tip millimeter by millimeter. Got it, Dr. Peterson exclaimed, holding up the small metal instrument with his forceps. It's out. The relief in the room was immediate and overwhelming. Lisa took her first full breath in over an hour, and the sound was like music to everyone's ears. Helen wiped away tears she didn't realize she had been crying, while the paramedics watched Lisa's oxygen levels climb back to normal. How do you feel? Dr. Peterson asked, his own hands now shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Lisa tried to speak and found that her voice, while hoarse, was audible again. Thank you, she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been since the accident. I thought I was going to die. Despite the successful removal, the paramedics insisted on taking Lisa to the hospital for a complete examination. The drive to the emergency room was nothing like the panicked rush everyone had expected just an hour earlier. Lisa sat upright on the stretcher, able to speak in a hoarse but clear voice, asking Rodriguez about his family and thanking him repeatedly for his help. In 15 years of doing this job, I've never seen anything quite like that, Rodriguez told her as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. You're incredibly lucky to have Dr. Peterson around. Not many dentists would have attempted something like that at the hospital. Dr. Williams, the emergency room physician, was amazed by what he saw. The throat examination showed minimal damage, just some minor swelling, and irritation where the scalar tip had been lodged. Honestly, I'm not sure I would have attempted that removal outside of a controlled surgical environment, he told Dr. Peterson. Your knowledge of dental anatomy clearly made the difference. Lisa spent the night in the hospital for observation, but by morning she was feeling much better. Her voice was still scratchy, but it was getting stronger by the hour. Tommy was the first visitor, bringing her a card he had made with crayons that showed a smiling tooth. And the words, "Get well soon, Mom." I was scared when Helen told me what happened, Tommy admitted, climbing carefully onto the hospital bed. But she said Dr. Peterson was like a superhero and saved you. Lisa smiled and hugged her son. He definitely was like a superhero that night. The story of what happened at Peterson Dental Clinic spread quickly through their small town. Within a week, Lisa found herself telling the story to reporters from the local newspaper and even a medical journal that wanted to document the unusual case. Dr. Peterson, characteristically modest, kept insisting that any competent dentist would have done the same thing. I just did what needed to be done, he said during one interview. Lisa has been part of our dental family for years. You don't hesitate when family needs help. But the experience changed everyone involved in different ways. Helen, who had been considering moving to Florida to be closer to her daughter, decided to stay in town. After that night, I realized how much this community needs people who can help in emergencies. She explained to Lisa over coffee a few weeks later. I may be retired from nursing, but I'm not retired from helping people. Lisa returned to work after a week of rest, but the clinic had already implemented new safety protocols. All instrument trays now had raised edges to prevent tipping, and there were new guidelines about never working alone during closing procedures. Dr. Peterson also invested in emergency communication, equipment that would allow someone to call for help even if they couldn't speak clearly. What happened to you was a 1 in a million accident, Dr. Peterson told Lisa on her first day back. But we're going to make sure it never happens to anyone else. The most profound change was in Lisa herself. The experience had given her a new perspective on life and the importance of the people around her. She started volunteering at the local fire department, teaching basic first aid courses to community members. Her story became a powerful example of how quickly routine situations can become emergencies. I always thought I was careful, Lisa would tell her first aid students. I had been using those instruments for 9 years without any problems. But accidents can happen to anyone, anywhere. The most important thing is having people around you who know how to help. Dr. Peterson kept the scalar tip in a small display case in his office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the importance of being prepared for unexpected situations. He used it as a teaching tool when training new dental assistants, showing them how even the most routine procedures required constant attention to safety. 6 months after the incident, Lisa received a letter from a dental hygienist in another state who had read about her experience in a professional journal. The woman wrote about how Lisa's story had inspired her clinic to review their own safety procedures and implement new protocols. Your experience probably prevented similar accidents from happening to other people, the letter said. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story. On the anniversary of the accident, Lisa, Dr. Peterson, and Helen met for dinner at their favorite restaurant. They had become closer friends through the experience, bound together by the memory of that frightening night and the relief of its successful outcome. I still can't believe how well everything worked out, Lisa said, raising her glass of water and a toast. A year ago, I never could have imagined that such a scary situation would lead to so many positive changes. Helen smiled and raised her own glass. Sometimes the worst moments bring out the best in people. That night showed me that we're all capable of more than we think we are. Dr. Peterson nodded in agreement, and it reminded me why I became a dentist. In the first place, to help people when they need it most. That night wasn't about dental work. It was about being there for someone who needed help. The experience had taught all of them that heroism isn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Sometimes it's simply about staying calm under pressure, using the skills you have, and being willing to help when someone needs it most. Lisa's story became a reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when circumstances demand it.